Well, season 1 of Disney Plus streaming Star Wars TV series Ahsoka wrapped up with 8 episodes of boring, directionless, and uninspiring TV. And we're going to go through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Well, a lot more bad and ugly than good. Ahsoka exemplifies much of what is wrong with the Star Wars universe. And I'll be honest, Star Wars lost me a long time ago, and I struggle to watch anything that comes from Disney's Lucasfilm. Star Wars TV shows feel like a cookie-cutter assortment of loosely related stories that serve more as filler on Disney Plus than well-written, thought-provoking stories that keep us enthralled in a world of science fiction, space wizards, and glowing plasma swords. It feels like a rushed creative process that compromises the details that bring the universe of Star Wars to life, just to get a higher density of TV shows on their streaming service, Disney Plus. If you had a secret camera microphone in the editing room, the one phrase you'd probably hear repeatedly is, "Good enough." Now we have Dave Filoni's Star Wars streaming TV show Ahsoka, a show that follows the same boring and uninspired storytelling that an amateur writer with a minimal creative writing skills could have wrote. Unimaginative, two-dimensional characters that lack motivation and any semblance of personality and likability. The show lacks the basic elements of storytelling to establish a compelling and emotionally gripping progression of episodes to keep audiences invested in its characters and storyline.
Well, you never should have trusted me. I'm on drugs.
There's no tension or promise of a satisfying payoff, no subplots that escalate into a dramatic finish for the season finale, or the promise of new questions, rivalries, or stakes that carry the story into the next season. I find it amazing how Disney gives producers with questionable results budgets of hundreds of millions of dollars to write mediocre scripts that any first-year university creative writing students could write better. I'm baffled why Disney doesn't use qualified screenwriters to proofread their scripts before they greenlight it for production. I'm a screenwriter here in Los Angeles, and there are hundreds of screenwriters everywhere, qualified writers that can peruse scripts and help determine if there are critical elements lacking in story structure.
Well, Dick, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence.
But somehow, it always seems that the least qualified are the ones entrusted with writing the scripts and developing the TV shows. The main protagonist, Ahsoka, is an overconfident and stoic two-dimensional character whose personality is as much of a flat line as her character arc is. There's nothing about her that makes the audience relate to her. In fact, it's more the opposite. She enters every fight with a smug, cocky expression that tells the audience she fears nothing and that she considers any opponent as nothing more than a nuisance. This literally eliminates any tension, which is the whole point to there being a story in the first place. A protagonist who never looks worried or concerned at the obstacles she faces will never invoke worry or concern in the viewer. A protagonist needs to endear themselves to the audience as they pursue their goal and deal with an internal conflict that establishes character flaws and weaknesses. Things that force her to face her fears and to have to fight to overcome her shortcomings to succeed in a struggle against a powerful antagonist. Stories need tension, stakes, and believable motivations, relatable characters, and a feeling that the forces that the protagonist is up against are superior in their strength and power. But right from the beginning, Ahsoka writer and director Dave Filoni had major story issues he should have addressed to get audiences dialed into the characters and the emerging season 1 conflict. He should have established who all the characters are, their history with each other, and backstory. It would have gone a long way to properly set up Ahsoka for viewers who never watched any of the shows that set up these characters in years past. Ahsoka Tano was first introduced in the 2008 Clone Wars animated film, followed by the animated TV series that aired from 2008 to 2020. Dave Filoni actually directed 33 episodes and was the writer on 10 of them. Ahsoka also appeared in the animated TV series Rebels, as well as a number of other Star Wars TV shows, so her history is very extensive. Dave Filoni should have started with a 3 or 4 minute prologue to establish the characters, explaining to the audience who Ahsoka is and establish reasons for why the audience should care. He could have introduced viewers to the Imperial Grand Admiral Thrawn and why his return to the galaxy would be catastrophic. Filoni needed to demonstrate what the stakes are, and with it, the reason for the first season to even exist.
Interesting choice of words.
He could have shown the destruction of entire worlds consumed with war and the death and misery it would bring if Thrawn ever found a way to return. It would give meaning to everything that happens in season 1 and why Ahsoka should stop at nothing to make sure Thrawn never returns. But instead of giving audiences the important backstories for Ahsoka and Thrawn, Dave Filoni jumps right into the story without touching on any of the important story elements for those who have never seen any of the previous shows, or even for those who have. Imagine how audiences would have received Lord of the Rings without the initial 6-minute prologue. It gave the audience a reason to be intrigued by what's to come, by informing them by what's already happened. It introduced the Ring of Power and the main conflict that will consume Middle-earth while establishing the movie's powerful antagonist Sauron. It created instant tension and stakes in a matter of minutes and gave the audience morsels of compelling story beats to chew on and wonder how the protagonist can defeat such a powerful opponent. It gave the audience information and context to understand the stakes and who the characters are. Instead, Filoni starts off with a dull opening scene that gives us a peek into how bad the set and costume design will be.
Hey, be careful with that, huh?
No, it's okay. It's not loaded.
When a set looks like a TV set, your show is in big trouble. You can see people standing, staring at static lines painted on glass, and a captain's chair that looks more like a vacuum cleaner than a futuristic command console. Not to mention the costumes, a dull powder blue on mocha with short sleeves and collared neck finish. This is a TV show with a $15 million per episode budget.
Add that up and you get...
Do you want me to speak?
We're not pointing you yet.
Great movies and TV shows start with a powerful opening scene. One that does one of two things: establishes the protagonist or introduces the antagonist and demonstrates their power and why they should be feared, which leads to the main conflict. Both methods have their merits. The Terminator and Star Wars: A New Hope are two movies that begin with an opening scene that showcases the antagonist and demonstrates their power so that when we're introduced to the protagonist, audiences fully comprehend the threat, and with it, the anticipation of the conflict that's to come. In The Terminator, James Cameron opted to show audiences Arnold Schwarzenegger as the T-800 first to establish the robotic threat that underpins the entire premise of the story. While in Star Wars, we see an imposing character enter the rebel ship, confident, dressed in black with an intimidating mask and helmet and deep, heavy breathing. Our first impression of Darth Vader does everything it needs to introduce us to the conflict and tension that's to come. We see his power and his ruthless nature as he squeezes the life out of an uncooperative rebel. Darth Vader has such a lasting impression on Star Wars fans that Dave Filoni needed to add him into season 1 of Ahsoka for everything that he represents, because he had no ability to write something himself that would capture the imagination of his audience. He needed member berries to help make his show work.
So, yeah.
Oh, hi, Mimi. Come on, we have to hurry. Mimi Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, come on, Tubbs, you gotta keep up, Mimi.
In the opening scene of Ahsoka, Dave Filoni tries to replicate the opening scene of Star Wars, but falls short of any similar dramatic effect. I find it baffling why a ship carrying such a high-value prisoner would even allow an Imperial shuttle to dock, given that it's transmitting old Jedi codes. But for the plot to work, it requires the captain to make irrational and stupid decisions. So that's what happens.
Yeah, but why even bring that up?
You don't bring it up. You just let him in.
So why mention it?
No one will.
So why are we talking about it?
You're talking about it. I'm just saying let him in.
Yeah, let him in.
Exactly.
Right?
Good.
Okay.
After a brief fight and a bunch of extending hands and deflecting blaster rifles, we see one of our main antagonists, Morgan Elsbeth. The obvious problem is that her introduction is anticlimactic and carries with it no semblance of threat. The visual gives audiences no appreciation of any significant conflict to come, except for a middle-aged woman with no identifiable power. Dave Filoni should have shown a hint of her threat in a prologue to establish her as a worthy antagonist that the main characters will have to contend with as the story unfolds. Compare the opening scene of A New Hope with Darth Vader's introduction and Dave Filoni's introduction of Morgan Elsbeth in Ahsoka. Now, I have nothing against the actress Diana Lee Inosanto. As a matter of fact, she's a martial arts expert and the goddaughter to the one and only Bruce Lee. But if you're going to establish the main threat and antagonist in your opening scene, this is not the way to do it.
You make a fool of me and everyone here.
In our next scene, we're introduced to our main character, Ahsoka, which is a long, drawn-out scene that's almost 10 minutes long, nearly 25% of the entire first episode. She's looking for a MacGuffin, a map that will lead to the whereabouts of Thrawn. Now, this scene demonstrates the terrible pacing that plagues this entire series. It's incredibly slow, as scene after scene is filled with long, silent stares, arm folding, more arm folding, and bland dialogue that's boring, non-confrontational, and riddled with on-the-nose one-liners.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
This has everything to do with a script that is poorly written, and at the very least, requires a number of further rewrites to flush out the characters and heighten the intensity of the conflict. It feels like a first draft script that went right into production without any proofreading. The world building of the original Star Wars movie back in 1977 was responsible for sparking the entire Star Wars phenomenon. It's a universe that combines a futuristic science fiction backdrop with sword fighting and a magic that's called the Force. The easiest way to show how bad the world building is in Ahsoka is again in episode 1 with the introduction of Sabine Wren in Lothal. She has disappeared from a ceremony to remember those that were lost in the war. The ceremony has a sporadic crowd with a number of people set on a 200-foot high platform with abysmal CGI. But probably the most egregious error is when we see Sabine riding her hover cycle on her own personal highway.
It's mine. It's all mine.
Lothal is a city of 2 to 3 million people, but yet no one is on the highway. Every scene we see her on the highway, she's alone and has the entire highway to herself. Now, whether you notice it or not, it makes the world building in Ahsoka fall flat and feel absolutely fake. I'll give you another example that not only undermines world building, but the very notion of believability. When Sabine is attacked by hunter droids, she literally punches and elbows them in the face. What makes it worse, the robots actually react to it. Have you ever punched solid metal?
Nobody will be that stupid.
I'm going to say no, you haven't, because everyone knows you'd probably break your knuckles. Then in a lightsaber fight with Shin, Sabine is literally impaled by a lightsaber.
Just a flesh wound. Look, stop that! Chicken! Chicken!
It's incredibly disappointing that in a modern Star Wars universe, not even a 12,000 degree stab through the gut with a plasma saber can kill a main character. It's plot armor at its very worst, and by the 8th minute of the 2nd episode, Sabine is completely healed from her wounds. This tells the audience that there is very little that will threaten any main character or a wound that will take them down. It dramatically lowers the tension as each character is blessed with plot armor to ensure their survival so they can participate in the next story beat. The script conveniently makes things happen that need to happen to allow the dull and listless storyline to continue to unfold. From one episode to the next, perfect timing and amazing coincidences allow the characters to move on to the next plot points. In episode 3, one of the most ridiculous scenes has Ahsoka having a duel in space against 3 starfighters. Now, what amazes me is that the weapons on these fighters use dumb lasers that rely on luck and circumstance to hit their targets. The US military has missiles that can hit their target within 10 yards from 10,000 miles away. Now, why would starfighters even use laser weapons that miss their targets 99% of the time when they could shoot one missile and have it hit its target every time? With every episode, the writing gets increasingly lazy and sets up fight scenes for the mere sake of trying to insert tension into the plot, all of which end in a draw or with little to no consequences. There are no setups or payoffs. There isn't any character that you feel compelled to root for because there are no stakes for the characters that will garner grave consequences if they fail. We're told explicitly that the one thing that cannot happen is for Thrawn to return to the galaxy, but it's never explained why, nor are we shown the consequences. We never see any display of the power from Thrawn or the things he's capable of. Just that he is a master tactician and the entire galaxy is at risk if he returns. You have to believe it as fact because it was mentioned by Ahsoka. Not good enough. Every episode is like a paint-by-number storyboard where each slow-paced scene transitions to the next. There are no great revelations, no plot twists or surprises. Dave Filoni relies on the insertion of Anakin Skywalker with flashes of Darth Vader to get fans excited for the series because the writing has no merit of its own. By episode 8, the plot is so thin that they try and amp us up with the tension of a final battle between Ahsoka and Morgan. But the problem is that over 7 previous episodes, there was never an attempt to show a rivalry between them. No standoffs or threats or promises of retribution or revenge. The story didn't build up any confrontation between them in any of the episodes leading up to their showdown in the final episode. When Ahsoka kills Morgan, there's no satisfying feeling that we get because they never establish any personal animosity or feud between them. It means nothing. You might remember in Game of Thrones, the writers spent 7 seasons establishing Jon Snow and the Night King rivalry as they confront each other, have their eyes meet across the water at Hardhome. They set up what was going to be a final battle and payoff between the two, until the writers decided to give the kill to Arya Stark, someone who had very little personal stake or series build-up to earning the kill. So it felt empty, almost meaningless. It was like the final battle between Jon Snow and the Night King was stolen from the audiences for a surprise twist that had no reason for being and gave very little satisfaction and payoff for the audience. But Ahsoka is even far worse in its setup, or actually non-setup. Nowhere in 8 episodes does Dave Filoni even try to give the audience an earned payoff to set up a final battle between the two characters who spent the better part of season 1 trying to disadvantage or kill their opponent, to establish a season-long rivalry or reason for a payback. Ahsoka fails to develop any valuable plot points that has the audience longing for a final showdown in the final episode with Morgan. But here is the biggest reason Ahsoka is an 8-episode failure. The goal Ahsoka had for season 1, the very reason she was doing what she was doing, was to stop Thrawn from returning to the galaxy. We were told that it would result in another war and be catastrophic. Well, she failed in that goal, and in the final scene of the season finale, we see Ahsoka with Sabine without any care for the fact that they failed, that Thrawn actually made it back to the galaxy. They don't show any concern whatsoever, and in fact, look happy for what may be an outdoor camping trip for them. They should exude fear, concern, and shock for what's to come. The problem with Ahsoka starts with the script. It's terrible and lacks the most basic of story elements that a creative writing student learns in English 101. As a screenwriter, I've written award-winning TV scripts and screenplays, and each one had countless rewrites and changes. But that's what a great script goes through. A great script takes the viewer on a journey where they learn, discover, and are even shocked by the events of any one episode. A great screenplay has a relatable protagonist with both internal and external conflicts, who is embroiled in a life-altering conflict with a powerful antagonist who stands in their way. The only thing that ended up happening after 8 episodes of Ahsoka are that Thrawn and Ahsoka traded places. Now Ahsoka is trapped in a faraway galaxy, and Thrawn has returned home. But I have no doubt that writer Dave Filoni can call in some space whales to bring her back, or any other kind of simplistic solution to have Ahsoka return to try and stop Thrawn in season 2. And that's all I have to say about Ahsoka. If you like what you heard, thanks for listening. And if you didn't, I thank you all the same. And I'll see you in our next episode.